From the world's most volatile region, conflicts over faith and boundaries. Stories of death, destruction, despair, and hope. WION brings you to the heart of the action. Incisive analysis, unrivaled perspective, and exclusive ground reports. Watch West Asia Post every Friday, 8:30 p.m. IST with me, Radi Francis. Only on WION, World is One.
Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views, and analysis. WIOnews.com. World is One.
Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started. Our world is in the middle of an unprecedented crisis. There is a pandemic, a war, an inflation, and a food shortage. How are countries reacting in times like these? America is pushing more weapons into war zones, trying to profit from the war. China, as usual, is exporting more debt, but India is offering real solutions. Ever since the pandemic struck, India has been part of every solution. First, it exported HCQ, hydroxychloroquine, to the world. Then it sent life-saving vaccines to the world. And now, as the world grapples with the food crisis triggered by the Ukraine war, India is offering to export wheat to kitchens around the globe. It is putting food on the world's plate. On Gravitas tonight, we discuss how India is part of the solution story. It is not often that I start this show with a soundbite, but tonight calls for an exception. I'd like you to listen to this.
એમાં એક નવી મુસીબત દુનિયા સામે આવી છે. અન્નના ભંડાર ખૂટવા માંડ્યા છે. કાલે હું અમેરિકાના રાષ્ટ્રપતિ જોડે ચર્ચા કરતો હતો તો એમણે પણ કહ્યું કે મોટું ત્યારે મેં એમને કહ્યું તમે અમને WTO જો પરવાનગી આપે થોડી રાહત કરી દે કે ભાઈ ભારતમાં જે ભંડાર પડ્યા છે તમે બહાર મોકલી શકો છો તો અમે કાલે મોકલવા તૈયાર છે.
It is the 13th of April 2022. Our world is fighting a war, a food crisis and a pandemic, and India is the only country that is offering solutions on all fronts. Today, India offered to put food on the world's plate. Egypt has confirmed that it is considering importing wheat from India. You see, India produces more than 107 million tons of wheat. It is now preparing to export more than 7 million tons from its stock. India could soon be sending wheat to Nigeria, Turkey, Vietnam, among other countries. And these countries depend on wheat from Ukraine and Russia. But these two countries are at war. So India has stepped in to put food on their plate. On the plate of people who are thousands of miles away from New Delhi, people India gains nothing by appeasing. So here's a quick question. What makes a great leader? A corporate pundit will tell you, above all, a leader must be a problem solver. And that's true not just for boardrooms, but also global crisis rooms. Even at the world stage, a leader is one who solves a crisis. India has been that leader for the last few years. This story begins in the year 2020. The Wuhan virus was declared a pandemic. Doctors were struggling to understand it. People were falling sick and dying. Around the same time, a medicine called hydroxychloroquine or HCQ was presented as a possible lifesaver. Studies were yet to back it. What the world needed at that point was not peer reviews but hope, and India gave that hope. In the first 2 months of the pandemic, India supplied HCQ and paracetamol to 120 countries. At a time when the world was banning export of essentials, India sent medicines to at least 40 countries free of cost, 40 countries. I remember India's Commerce and Industry Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, making a very interesting comparison. He said, during turbulence, a captain advises you to fasten your own seatbelt first before helping others. But when our world was hit by turbulence, India also tied the seatbelts of more than 3 to 4 billion people across the globe. So that was 2020. With 2021 came the race for Wuhan virus vaccines. The West began hoarding. Canada bought 9 shots for every citizen. 9. The United Kingdom got 5 shots for every citizen. The European Union ordered 1.6 billion doses for an adult population of 375 million. Do the math. By March 2021, America, the wannabe flag bearer of equality, had bought vaccines for 3 times its adult population. So the rich countries were hoarding life-saving jabs. The poor and developing countries had little or nothing. Once again, India stepped in with its Vaccine Maitri program. India sent vaccines to 98 countries, from Bhutan to the Seychelles, Myanmar and Morocco, to Barbados, Dominica, St. Kitts and Nevis, Suriname, Congo, Nigeria, the likes that the West never bothered to look at or help. Until, of course, everyone at home was vaxxed and the leftover shots began expiring. Then we have China. China did send some aid. Some 165 million Chinese vaccines to Latin America and the Caribbean. But these shipments came loaded with a PR campaign or letters for political favors. In Honduras, for example, vaccines were reportedly part of a barter deal. China gives jabs. Honduras snaps ties with Taiwan. India sent 175 million vaccines with no strings attached. China leveraged its vaccines to push Beijing's political agenda. The West leveraged its money power to hoard. India leveraged its position as the world's pharmacy to push for vaccine equity. Again, India was part of the solution. The year 2022 brought a new set of problems. Russia invaded Ukraine, a war broke out in Europe. The West had been fanning these flames and it was quick to pick sides. More than 1 month on, Ukraine is in a shambles and the rest of the world is suffering the consequences. Inflation has shot through the roof. There's a shortage of wheat and essential food items. Russia, remember, is the world's largest exporter of wheat. Ukraine supplies 10% of global wheat. With these two countries at war, what happens to kitchens around the world? Once again, India has stepped in to help. India has offered to meet the extra demand for food supplies, be it from South Asia, Europe, West Asia, Southeast Asia or North Africa. Like you heard the Indian Prime Minister say, India is offering to put food on plates around the world. India is offering to be a part of the solution once again. What has the US offered so far in this war? Weapons. What does China offer during times of crisis? Debt. Look at Sri Lanka, a problem generously contributed to by China. Where is China now? Where is America? You see, it is very easy to take a hard stand on wars, flood a country with weapons, help your own defense industry in the process, but it takes leadership to offer real solutions, and India has been offering solutions to problems, not sanctions, prioritizing peace over politics and people over political lobbies. And now we have an example of what happens when you put politics over people. Sri Lanka. Yesterday it announced a preemptive default, meaning no more payments to foreign creditors, no upcoming installments will be paid, and this is a first. Sri Lanka will default for the first time in its history. Nothing can be more humiliating for a country. A default technically means you're bankrupt, and that's what Sri Lanka increasingly looks like. Look at the latest estimates. Sri Lanka's foreign currency reserves have fallen drastically. Why do you need these reserves? To pay for imports. Do you know how much money Sri Lanka is left with? Just $500 million. That's loose change when it comes to governments or countries. 500 million. They're seeking a bailout. Next week, the government will talk to the IMF. They might get the help they need, but before the money arrives, the Rajapaksas could be out of office. The Sri Lankan opposition is moving a no-confidence motion. We've been talking about this on the show. The Rajapaksas, remember, lost majority a couple of weeks ago. More than 40 lawmakers left them. So the opposition was expected to move a no-confidence motion at some point, and now it's happening. Leader of opposition Sajith Premadasa made the announcement himself. He said they will push not one but two motions plus a constitutional amendment. So what are they trying to do here? Let me break that down for you. What is the opposition in Sri Lanka trying to achieve? They want to oust the Rajapaksas from all positions of power. And for this, they plan to do three things. Number one, file an impeachment motion against President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Number two, file a no-confidence motion against the government. If that succeeds, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa will be out, his government will be dismissed. And number three, a constitutional amendment. And this is a bold move. The opposition wants to abolish the 20th Amendment. This amendment was passed 2 years ago by the Rajapaksas. It basically reduces the power of the Prime Minister and the Parliament, and it makes the President more powerful. Thanks to the 20th Amendment, the President of Sri Lanka can sack the Prime Minister and his cabinet. He can dissolve the Parliament just 1 year after elections. And the President can do all of it at his discretion, no checks and balances. Also, the 20th Amendment gives full immunity to the President from prosecution. The opposition wants to reverse all of this. They want to reduce the powers of the President, strengthen the office of the Prime Minister, and empower the Parliament of Sri Lanka. So that is the plan. The proposals are yet to reach Parliament, though. 50 members have signed on the impeachment motion so far. They need 40 more signatures. Only then can they go to Parliament. What are the chances of the opposition cobbling up these numbers? Well, they look pretty good. They seem to have the support of the people. The road outside the President's office has turned into a protest site. People have pitched tents, saying they won't leave until Gotabaya Rajapaksa steps down.
This is a protest where they're going to do until all the Rajapaksas leave and all the ministers leave from the ruling party. So day and night, so there are people camping here for days and night. They're going to stay here till all the Rajapaksas and the corrupted politicians leave.
Our country is in turmoil. We, as a nation, we are not Sinhalese, we are not Tamil, we are not Islam. We are single nationality, Sri Lankan. We are here today to go home, Rajapaksa. Send him home. It doesn't mean we want him to go directly home. We want him to disclose his assets. Give us the money he stole from us. And give us what they have taken from this country for years and years, all the Rajapaksas. And reinstate the government in a better way and change the system. That is what we are asking.
Go home, Rajapaksa. That's the message from these protesters. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa has responded. He says he's willing to meet them. Also, the lawmakers who've defected. The Rajapaksas want to meet all of them. We're talking about 40 MPs here. They have rejected the offer of talks, though. The MPs don't want to meet. Meanwhile, the negotiations with the IMF are scheduled for next week, and it's not going to be easy getting a bailout. Sri Lanka will have to commit to some tough conditions like raise income tax, raise taxes on fuel. And these are some of the recommendations that have come from the IMF. And for any government, these decisions will be unpopular, raising taxes. For the Rajapaksas, these decisions could spell the end of their regime, that is, if they survive the no-trust vote. Well, we know of a leader in the neighborhood who did not survive such a vote, a certain Imran Khan of Pakistan. His country now has a new prime minister. It's day 2 of Shehbaz Sharif's government, and he seems to be working overtime to cement his authority. And quite literally, when I say overtime, reports suggest that right after assuming office, Shehbaz Sharif's first big decision was to reduce the number of holidays for government officials. From now on, government offices in Pakistan will apparently work 6 days a week, and office timings have been increased to 10 hours. Another report suggests that on Tuesday morning, which was his first day in power, Shehbaz Sharif reached office at 7 a.m. He's also laid out his foreign policy plans. He will soon embark on a visit to China and Saudi Arabia, usual suspects. The dates are not out, but the details are. In Saudi Arabia, Prime Minister Sharif will first perform the Umrah at Mecca, and then he'll meet members of the Saudi royal family. And remember, the Sharif family maintains close ties with the Saudis. In 1999, when Nawaz Sharif was deposed in a coup and his family members were put in jail, it was the then Saudi king, Abdullah bin Abdulaziz, who convinced Pervez Musharraf to send the Sharif family into exile in Jeddah. So obviously, Shehbaz Sharif will head there to seek blessings from his family's saviors. We'll track that meeting, of course, for you. But what about Imran Khan in the meantime? What is he up to? Last we checked, he'd shifted back to his Banigala residence. And what's he doing there? Holding meetings, chalking out his next move, discussing his party's future. Some pictures have emerged. They show a visibly distressed Imran Khan interacting with PTI leaders at his home office. Interestingly, in all of these pictures, he's dressed in a casual polo neck t-shirt and jeans, not his trademark traditional Pathani suit and waistcoat. Now, some see this as a sign that he has accepted the fact that he is no longer in power. Others say that he's trying to reinvent himself, perhaps go back to his image of a liberal leader. That's going to be tough. In any case, the optics are not working, especially for his team. In the last 3 days, at least 8 members of PTI's social media team have been arrested. What for? For running a defamation campaign against the Pakistan Army chief. Pakistan's Federal Investigation Agency says that it has prepared a list of 50 PTI workers who indulged in anti-state and anti-army activities, which basically means that more arrests could follow soon. Attempts are being made to stop PTI leaders from flying abroad and get them probed for corruption. A no-fly list has been prepared. It has names of several PTI leaders. Some petitions have also been filed. They accuse Imran Khan of trying to destroy Pakistan's political system and threatening to impose martial law in the country. The Supreme Court of Pakistan is expected to take them up. So the establishment is clearly trying to end Imran Khan's political career. There are also rumors that it has already roughed him up. These reports suggest that Imran Khan was recently Will Smithed by the Pakistan Army chief, if you know what I mean. Where are these rumors stemming from? From a report by BBC Urdu Pakistan. On the 10th of April, it published this piece claiming that on the night of the 9th of April, a helicopter landed at Imran Khan's house. On board was an uninvited guest, General Qamar Javed Bajwa, the chief of Pakistan Army. Now, the report says that he went there to meet Imran Khan. It doesn't state why or what for, but people familiar with the development are making some wild claims. They say the army chief went there to teach Imran Khan a lesson, that apparently General Bajwa slapped Imran Khan and then ordered his men to beat him up. And I must repeat, these are all claims. We've not been able to verify them. They're being widely reported in Pakistan, though. We can tell you, though, that leaders in Pakistan have been flying into a temper. A few days back, we showed you how PTI leader Fawad Chaudhry heckled a journalist. Now another video has emerged. It shows a former member of Imran Khan's party clashing with current leaders at a hotel in Islamabad. I'll wrap the story with this. So Pakistan is in disarray. Europe too is desperately trying to get its act together after the Ukraine invasion. European leaders did not take that threat seriously. Now they're worried about what Russia could do next. They fear the conflict could spill over. Finland is one European country that also shares a border with Russia. It is preparing for war. Civilians are learning how to use guns. Giant stockpiles of drugs and fuel are being created. And Finland's government could apply for a NATO membership. Our next report tells you more.
The worst fears of Europe are being realized. The invasion of Ukraine has made Finland jittery. Finland shares a border with Russia too. The civilians fear the conflict in Ukraine could come to them, so they are preparing. Thousands of civilians are reaching out to the reserve forces. They want military training. The reserve forces are stepping up. They are conducting training sessions. The country's National Reservist Association has around 45,000 members. It has gained more than 6,000 new members in recent months. The National Defence Training Association coordinates training events. It has seen civilian enrollment jump by 8 times. Training sessions like these are now oversubscribed. Here, civilians are learning how to shoot a gun and engage with a target. Finland's government too is preparing for war. A strategic stockpile of essentials is ready. It has 6 months of all major fuels. Pharma companies have been asked to import essential drugs. They must keep 3 to 10 months' worth of drugs with them. Last month, iodine and potassium pills flew off the shelves. Demand for anti-radiation drugs shot up by 100 times because Russia refused to rule out the use of nuclear weapons. Despite the extensive preparations, Finland feels vulnerable. It wants an effective deterrent against a potential Russian attack. In Europe, the ultimate insurance for that is a NATO membership, and Finland wants to join the club.
We have deepened our NATO partnership until now, hand in hand with Sweden, ever since Russia illegally annexed Crimea. The difference between being a partner and being a member is very clear and will remain so. There is no other way to have security guarantees than under NATO's deterrence and common defence as guaranteed by NATO's Article 5.
For the longest time, Finland has stayed neutral, but Russia's Ukraine invasion has changed public opinion. Before the war, just 20% of the Finns wanted a NATO membership. Now, 60% of the population backs the idea. Finland isn't the only one. Sweden, too, is considering joining NATO. It could make a move in June. NATO will hold a key meeting in Madrid that month. Reports claim Sweden could submit its application then. But Swedish Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson isn't committing to a deadline publicly.
I think you really must analyze the new situation, do it very seriously, think about the consequences, the pros and cons of all potential ways forward, and I think you have to be very serious in this work. This is exactly where we are right now. Finland just made their redogörelse, and we are now having the discussions with the parties in the Swedish Parliament. We also have a dialogue within my party. I wanted to have take this serious situation very seriously, and then we make a decision.
There is clear expression of intent from Finland and Sweden. But will NATO open its doors? NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has given his backing in public. NATO members like America, the UK, Germany, France and Turkey support the idea too. Russia has warned Finland and Sweden against NATO membership. So far, the Nordic states have ignored the threats from Moscow.
You know what happened in America yesterday? There was an attack in a subway in Brooklyn. At least 23 people were injured. We've been covering the story extensively from the ground. Now, the latest piece of information is that a suspect has been identified. We'll show you who this person is, the man on your screen. His name is Frank R. James, 62 years old. The police are calling him a person of interest. Now, given that this is an American story, expect some terms that seem to be misfits. For example, American authorities are calling this incident a case of shooting, not terrorism, shooting. Terrorism is probably what they would have called it had this man been an Arab or a Muslim. But Frank R. James is American. He has addresses in Wisconsin and Philadelphia. So this story is automatically played down. James becomes a person of interest, not a suspect, and his act of terror is called shooting, not terrorism. Hypocrisy is America's old problem. Denial is another. Now, what happened in Brooklyn could have been avoided had the terrorist/shooter not had access to firearms. Now, from the little that we know about James so far, it is clear that he's full of hate, full of anger. He admits this in one of the many videos that he's reportedly uploaded online. In one of them, he rants endlessly about race, about violence. He even issues threats to New York Mayor Eric Adams. He admits to attending psychiatric facilities, in other words, being mentally unwell. Now, this is what American apologists are playing up. They say this man was unwell, that he was mentally unfit. And that's why he set off smoke in a crowded subway and then opened fire. I'm afraid investigations do not work that way. Here's what you must begin by asking. What was a mentally unwell person doing with a firearm? Who gave him a gun? The American system did. It risked hundreds of lives by upholding the Second Amendment, which says, and I quote, "The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." It does not matter if the person is mentally stable or not. It does not matter if he's filled with hate. America arms this hate. Unless Washington admits this and addresses the root cause of such terrorism, incidents like Brooklyn will keep repeating. You see, there is no dearth of hate in the US. Something else happened in the country yesterday. 2 Sikh men were assaulted. They were beaten with a pole. Their turbans were removed. And this too happened in New York. A 3rd Sikh man was attacked in the same location around 10 days ago. Hate crimes against the Sikh community have gone up by 200% in recent years. And this is just one community we're talking about. There are many minority communities in America. There are many biases, many prejudices. There is anti-Semitism. In volatile societies like these, what you need are strong laws, laws that can protect people. But America has a law that enables violence. Anyone can walk up to a gun store and buy a gun. Apologists will say, but America has background checks. Sure, it does. It's a 10-minute online check, and the fact that mentally unstable people like Frank R. James can manage to get hold of a firearm speaks volumes about the effectiveness of these background checks. Today, there are some 327 million people in the US, but the country has 393 million firearms, more than their population. 4% of the world's population lives in the US, but 46% of the world's entire stock of privately owned arms is in America. 81.4 million adult Americans legally own an arm. 17 million others live in a home with a gun, meaning one argument, one bad day, one mental breakdown, and an American civilian has the trigger to pull at his or her disposal or go around shooting people like James did. In one of his videos, James blamed the system of New York for filling him with hate. And one fine day, he ensured that New Yorkers paid the price for this hate. How does that even work? Today, the US has the highest rate of deaths from gun violence among developed nations. There are more than 20,700 gun deaths. There were more than 20,700 deaths in 2021, gun deaths. At least 22 people were killed in incidents of gun terror in school. What is the White House doing about it? Lecturing other countries on human rights. Yesterday it was India they lectured, today it was Russia. Earlier today, US President Joe Biden accused Russia of genocide, a term used for deliberate killing of a group of people. People are also dying in America, by the way. There has been a rise in hate crimes. A 3-year-old was shot outside her daycare in Brooklyn in March. Another woman was shot in the face. In January, an 11-month-old girl was hit by a stray bullet. There are enough and more problems in the US, like there are in other countries. But clearly, they're not enough for the White House to look within. Speaking of problems, here's what's happening in China. The situation is going from bad to worse in Shanghai. New infections are breaking records. More than 25,000 cases were reported today. The situation is tough, to say the least. The Indian consulate in the city has become inaccessible due to restrictions as the people of Shanghai suffer inside their homes because of shortages. Here's a report.
That voice is of a mother. It's a desperate appeal for help. The woman's son had fever. She wanted some fever-reducing medicine. With Shanghai locked down and drugstores closed, the mother had no choice but to ask the neighbors for help. There are more like her. This may look like a construction site, but it is not. This is a makeshift quarantine center in Shanghai. A mother was shipped off here with her 3-year-old by the local authorities. Shanghai is still struggling to cope with its Wuhan virus surge. More than 130,000 cases have been reported so far. The number of new infections is rising every day. The people of Shanghai are struggling. Even Communist Party loyalists can't deny that. Hu Xijin, the former editor of state mouthpiece The Global Times, spoke out. He said he had seen the videos of protests in Shanghai. Chinese health officials predict there won't be any respite soon.
In the city of Shanghai, for 8 consecutive days, there have been over 10,000 new infected cases reported. The epidemic is in a period of rapid growth. Community transmission has not been effectively contained and has spilled over to multiple provinces and cities. We predict that in the next few days, the number of new infected cases will continue to be at a high level. We are still faced with grim and complicated challenges in the fight against the epidemic.
China's containment strategies are not working. This video is from near a quarantine center in Shanghai. These are believed to be the patients who were sent there. They came out to get food supplies. The locals living close to the quarantine site are worried. They fear more people are now getting sick in the area. The outbreak in Shanghai has led to diplomatic repercussions. The United States has asked its citizens to reconsider traveling to Shanghai, not because of the Wuhan virus outbreak, but due to China's response. The United States says Beijing is enforcing pandemic rules arbitrarily. America's non-emergency staff in Shanghai has been asked to go home. Beijing is outraged by the move.
We express strong dissatisfaction and firm opposition to the US politicizing and instrumentalizing the issue of personnel evacuation. We have lost stern representations with the US side. The US should immediately stop criticizing China's epidemic prevention policy, stop using the epidemic to engage in political manipulation, and stop smearing China.
Beijing's anger doesn't come as a surprise, but it's an undeniable fact that Shanghai is struggling. The Wuhan virus has gone out of control. The residents of Shanghai are getting desperate. They want some relief from the virus and the restrictions. China needs a new strategy to combat this outbreak. But will Beijing really pivot away from zero COVID?
So while Shanghai struggles China is chasing its world domination plans. A new threat has emerged. The Chinese military wants to expand its global foothold. It wants to build more bases abroad and send the People's Liberation Army there. We've known this for some time. Now, Beijing has roped in the private sector for this mission. Chinese companies are trying to get their hands on strips of land around the world. One of them is the China SAM Enterprise Group. For 3 years now, it has tried to get a foothold in the Solomon Islands. Last month, we told you about China's plans to build a base there. The draft of the agreement had leaked. Solomon Islands had denied those reports. But before this whole thing came to light, the SAM Enterprise Group also tried to make some moves in the country. It tried to get an island in the Solomons on a lease. At least two possibilities were discussed. First, the SAM Enterprise Group tried to get the Tulagi Island on lease. It did not materialize. Then it tried to lease some land in Isabel. Once again, the proposal did not go through. In both cases, a 75-year-long lease was proposed. So why was the Chinese company trying to lease an island in the Solomons, and that too for 75 years? The answer lies in a letter. It was sent 2 years ago on behalf of the SAM Enterprise Group. The letter reveals the intentions of the company, and I have a copy with me. Allow me to quote from what it says. AVIC and China SAM Enterprise Group intended to study opportunities to develop naval and infrastructure projects on leased land for the People's Liberation Army Navy with exclusive rights for 75 years. AVIC is owned by the Chinese government. It operates in the aerospace and defense sector. The SAM Group may be a private enterprise, but it effectively works as an extension of the Chinese military. The China SAM Enterprise Group was founded in 1985. It is a Beijing-based conglomerate. China Jing'an is one of the companies that is part of this group. It was founded as a subsidiary of China's Ministry of Public Security. The SAM Enterprise Group does more for the Chinese state. It makes weapons, and weapons of all kinds, from pistols to patrol boats. China Xinjiang is another affiliate of this conglomerate. It works on projects abroad for the Chinese Ministry of Defense. The China SAM Enterprise Group is a massive company, and it has clear links with the Chinese military establishment. It produces and trades in weapons. It builds projects outside the country for the Chinese Ministry of Defense. The same company tried to lease out an island inside a strategically important country. Can this really be just a business deal? There can be no doubt. Chinese investors are trying to get strategically important islands for Beijing, and the China SAM Enterprise Group is not the only one doing this. Multiple Chinese investors are involved in this effort. They either try to buy the islands or get a long-term lease. In some cases, the land is close to American allies or military installations. Sometimes these islands are part of key shipping lanes, or they overlook some important straits and channels. The Solomons is just one case study. A Chinese company tried to get an island near the Philippines too. It's called Fuga. Again, this island is strategically important. It is near the sea border with Taiwan. It falls between the South China Sea and the Pacific. Both Chinese and American Navy ships pass through Fuga while they are in transit. In 2019, a Chinese company tried to get a contract to build a smart city in Fuga. Unfortunately, the Navy of the Philippines sounded an alarm. The plan was called off. Now the Philippines will build its own naval station on Fuga. Cambodia, though, was not so fortunate. It gave a 99-year-long lease for an island to China, and this includes 20% of Cambodia's coastline. And these developments together confirm what many have speculated for a while. The Chinese private sector is not free. It is an extension of the Chinese state, even the Chinese military. And it is working to extend the influence of the Communist Party beyond China's borders. It's a story we'll be tracking. For the moment, we're heading to Israel, where the situation remains tense, similar to what it was this time last year. But this time, terror groups are also playing an active role. In the last 3 weeks, the Islamic State has carried out 2 attacks, killing at least 6 Israeli citizens. The Israeli media says there are at least 20 to 30 ISIS sleeper cells that are currently active in the country. And this has pushed Israeli forces into action. They're raiding Palestinian neighborhoods and arresting suspected terrorists. The Palestinians say Israel is targeting civilians too. They point at the killings of 2 women and a teenager. They say they were killed without any credible evidence. And this has amplified tensions further. Hamas issued a 3-word warning. It has told Israel, "We are coming." Here's a report.
Israel is on the edge once again, brimming with communal tensions. In the last 2 weeks, there have been numerous protests, clashes, attacks, and murders. A total of 29 people have died, 14 Israelis and 15 Palestinians. What explains the spate of violence? A host of factors. First is that this is a holy month. 3 religious festivals are overlapping: Ramadan, Easter, and Passover. Each year around this time, tensions flare up. There are processions which turn into clashes and eventually lead to violence. We saw this play out in 2021 and the year before. The second reason is policing tactics. Several roads in Palestinian territories are being closely guarded by Israeli police. Israel says this is only for security purposes. The Palestinians don't agree. They consider this bullying, a way to curb religious expression.
Prayer is something basic, and praying at Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem is unique. We came from Hebron and it took us a time, and we tried 3 times, but unfortunately they did not let me in and pray at Al-Aqsa. But we are trying.
The third reason behind the unrest are a spate of attacks on Israeli citizens. Since March 22, there have been at least 4 major attacks on Israelis. 2 of these attacks have been linked to the Islamic State. The first one came on 22nd March. A Palestinian man linked to ISIS stabbed and killed 4 people. Then on March 27th, 2 Israeli border police officials were killed. The attacker was reportedly an ISIS operative. Soon after these attacks, the Israeli media claimed that there are at least 20 to 30 ISIS sleepers currently active in the country. This made the Israeli security forces spring into action. They carried out several raids in Palestinian neighborhoods. But the attacks did not stop. Last Friday, there was another one, this time at a bar in Tel Aviv. A suspected Arab man killed 2 Israeli citizens. Within hours, he was traced down and shot dead. Soon after the attack unfolded, Naftali Bennett, the Prime Minister of Israel, made a big announcement. He appeared on national television and announced the beginning of a new offensive.
We will get wherever is needed, whenever, in order to cut off these acts of terror. The state of Israel has gone on the offensive.
So has the offensive begun? Yes, it has. Since last week, Israeli forces have carried out numerous raids and counter-terrorism operations. They've gunned down several suspected militants. Palestinians claim Israel is also targeting civilians. They point at the killing of 2 women and a teenager, also a mentally unstable man who was on the run. These killings have escalated tensions further. The Palestinians have hit the streets. They're holding demonstrations. Hamas, the biggest militant group in Palestine, seems to have sensed an opportunity. It has extended its support to the protesters and warned Israel of severe consequences.
The Palestinian people will confront until the end of this occupation, and the Palestinian people are trying to accumulate strength for the battle of liberation, and the Zionist enemy must prepare plans to withdraw and leave because we are coming.
We are coming, says Hamas. We are prepared, says Israel. It has warned its citizens to brace for more attacks, attacks which it says will not go unanswered.
With that, let's take a look at what else is making news across the world. Time for Gravitas Global Headlines.
Devastating floods have left 253 dead in the South African city of Durban after heaviest rains in 60 years. The storm is the deadliest on record in the country. Authorities are struggling to distribute aid to tens of thousands of displaced people. After Typhoon Maggie triggered landslides in coastal provinces and left 56 dead and over 200 others missing. After Joe Biden accused Russia of carrying out genocide against Ukrainians, the Kremlin has said the statement is unacceptable, calling it an attempt to distort the situation. Russian shells hit a residential area close to the Kharkiv airport. This sparked fire at a vocational school and damaged several nearby buildings. 2 people were injured in the fire. One of the largest Indian IT companies, Infosys, will be moving out of Russia. The company's CEO said the transaction to move the business from centers in Russia is already underway. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson offered a full apology after being fined for breaching COVID-19 lockdown laws in the Partygate scandal, but continues to defy calls for his resignation. The suspected killer of an Indian student in Canada has been arrested by Toronto police. 21-year-old Indian student Kartik Vasudev was shot and killed last week. Huge plumes of smoke were seen billowing from a wildfire in the mountains of New Mexico. The wind-driven wildfire burned dozens of homes and triggered evacuations of schools and neighborhoods in the mountain resort town. 13-time champions Real Madrid ended Chelsea's Champions League title defense following an epic 5-4 aggregate win in the quarterfinals. The Spanish Giants led 3-1 from the first leg, but goals from Mason Mount, Antonio Rudiger and Timo Werner put Chelsea ahead with 15 minutes left in regulation time. The hosts forced extra time after substitute Rodrigo volleyed home in the 80th minute and Karim Benzema scored what turned out to be the eventual winner in the 96th minute. Spain's Villarreal caused a huge upset in the other quarterfinals by knocking out 6-time champions Bayern Munich. Villarreal won the first leg by a solitary goal in Spain, but Robert Lewandowski leveled the tie on aggregate in the 52nd minute. Bayern's inability to convert chances came back to haunt them, with Nigerian Samuel Chukwueze scoring in the 88th minute to send his team to the semis for just the second time.
With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas images, including a special infographic shared by Prime Minister Modi of India. It shows the sound of UPI transactions through a process called data sonification. Thanks for watching.
गया नहीं अभी तक?
गाड़ी की सर्विस कब से ड्यू है यार?
ये थोड़ी जाएंगे कहीं, ये तो
गाड़ी की सर्विस करवाने के लिए कहीं जाने की जरूरत नहीं है। चिल, कोई गड़बड़ नहीं है। गो मैकेनिक पर पाए एक्सपर्ट कार सर्विसेज, 50 पॉइंट इंस्पेक्शन और 3 महीने की अनकंडीशनल वारंटी। डाउनलोड करें इंडिया का नंबर 1 कार सर्विसेज ऐप गो मैकेनिक।
Go mechanic.